Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, dear guests. It is a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Pugwash Croatia, a chapter of Pugwash Conferences on Science and World Affairs, which is, as you maybe know, the winner of Nobel Peace Prize in 1995. Well, this is our second AI gathering, and this time it is in collaboration with the Belgian Embassy, which we are very grateful for. And we have two speakers from Belgium and two from Croatia. From Croatia, we have one physicist and one chemist. At the first gathering, we highlighted the incredible success of transformer large language models. But as Dylan says, times they are changing. So while we're still amazed with while we are still amazed by the intelligence of transformers, we have to admit that some cracks also has appeared in the meantime. So the striking discrepancy between the impressive successes of transformers on seemingly complex tasks and the astonishing failures also on seemingly trivial text open questions about how to faithfully interpret their mixed capabilities. Why do transformers succeed and why do they fail, and what's the reason? It seems that transformers have problems with multi-hop reasoning, which moves beyond systems that simply retrieve facts toward models that can comprehend relationships, draw inferences, and bring together many diverse knowledge to solve problems. In short, they fail at the so-called composite problems. Or to take a very simple example, the basic multiplication, standard transformers such as GPT-4 fail badly at it, as maybe you know. When it multiplied two-digit numbers, it is accurate. When it multiplied three-digit numbers, it is succeed only 60% of time, and with two four-digit numbers, accuracy fell to 4%. Really, really bad. So we wonder what's the difference, because the algorithm, as far as we think of it, is completely the same, regardless of the number of digits. So what's going on? It seems that transformers do not understand this algorithm after all. And as we know, for good old AI, algorithmic AI, it is a trivial task. So it seems that good old AI is still not the historical garbage, as many people think nowadays. And no matter how much hype there is about new brute force AI, we are mostly thinking about today. So the questions are many. They are open-ended and extremely interesting. We will, I suppose, hear some answers today, and it is even more likely that we will hear some further questions. And I hope you enjoy and learn something from today's meeting. Now, I would like to ask our co-organizer, His Excellency Willem de Baat, Ambassador of Belgium, to address us. Please, Willem.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It's of course a pleasure welcoming you here at this forum about artificial intelligence, co-organized by Pugwash, Croatia, and the Belgian Embassy. It is one in a series of events that touch upon an intriguing, burning, and even dividing topic, as we have seen, for example, at yesterday's and Monday's summit in France, where not all participants wanted to back the declaration the end declaration emphasizing inclusive and sustainable artificial intelligence, and that was mainly because of the differing global perspectives on AI governance. Of course, I would like to thank you, the president of Pugwash and Znanstveni, for reaching out to us. And I would like as well, of course, thanking the speakers, the ones physically present here with us today, and the ones who will join us online. I'm not an expert at all, so I won't give you answers. I will only have questions. But I'm a diplomat, and I can afford stating the obvious about artificial intelligence today, and that is namely that the artificial intelligence sector is evolving fast with regionally varying approaches to its use, its regulation, investments, and international collaboration. Seen through my eyes of a diplomat who sees a political context in everything, I would say that today we see a global AI race, not as much instead of, but parallel to a new arms race. And we see a competition mainly between the US, China, and the EU, and of course, to a lesser extent also Russia and India, and perhaps we'll learn more about other players as well. And they all have a different strategic approach and play it to their strengths. And I hope we will hear a little bit more about that in today's interventions. I did a little experiment as a diplomat, and I wanted to see the differences between the work done by different tools. Now, I also must admit that my ministry doesn't allow me to use all available tools. I limited my little experiment to Microsoft Copilot and ChatGPT. And in fact, I asked 3 questions. I asked them, can you write me a speech of maximum 100 words addressing an American audience about the usefulness, the benefits, the challenges, and the risks of using artificial intelligence in diplomacy? I know it's not science, although I would like to say that diplomacy is a science, but I'm afraid I shouldn't. So I asked that question, then I asked another question, which is basically the same, but addressing a European audience. And I asked also the same question, addressing a Chinese audience in English, because I first got the text in Chinese and I totally lost. So, and I must say that it was quite interesting to see the differences. And in fact, in Copilot, I didn't see that many differences between these 3 texts, honestly. But in ChatGPT, and I'm going to read these texts, ChatGPT, on my question about the American audience, said, ladies and gentlemen, AI is revolutionizing diplomacy by analyzing data, predicting conflicts, and enhancing communication. It increases efficiency, reduces errors, and empowers smaller nations. However, challenges such as bias, misinformation, and cybersecurity risks remain. AI-driven propaganda and ethical concerns demand transparency and human oversight. The US must lead in AI governance, ensuring it upholds democratic values and security. By balancing innovation with caution, AI can serve as a tool for peace and global stability. Let us harness its potential responsibly. Let us harness its potential responsibly. Now I go to the text for the Chinese audience. Ladies and gentlemen, AI is transforming diplomacy by analyzing vast data, predicting conflicts, and enhancing international communication. So that's a little difference. It boosts efficiency, reduces errors, and strengthens global cooperation. However, challenges like bias, misinformation, and cybersecurity threats persist. Ethical concerns demand transparency and human oversight. China must collaborate in AI governance, ensuring it fosters stability and fairness in global relations. By balancing innovation with responsibility, AI can be a force for peace and progress. Let us work together to harness its full potential for the benefit of all. Now, there are some nuances, and you know that diplomats, we pay a lot of attention to the words. And then for the European audience, ladies and gentlemen, AI is reshaping diplomacy by analyzing data, predicting conflicts, and improving communication. It enhances efficiency, fosters international collaboration, and empowers smaller nations in global affairs. We didn't hear that with the Chinese. However, challenges such as bias, misinformation, and cybersecurity risks persist. Ethical oversight and transparency are crucial to ensuring AI aligns with European values of democracy and human rights. By embracing innovation while upholding responsibility, Europe can lead in shaping AI's role for a more stable and cooperative world. Let us work together to harness AI for the common good. So I was quite happy to hear that, in fact, we talk about common good and globalization, which, in my opinion, is part of the mission of Pugwash. Yeah. And I was also happy to see that there is a role for Europe. And perhaps that's because I asked the question yesterday after the announcement that Europe will also invest a huge money in developing AI. So I'm really looking forward to hearing perhaps where these differences come from in the data texts, and of course also to hear about how we can use AI both in social affairs and in sciences. Again, thank you very much, and let's hear more about AI.
So our first speaker is from Belgium, Dr. Bart de Klerk, and he works in the Department of Mathematics at Royal Military Academy, and his research is mainly in computing, in mathematics, in natural sciences, in engineering, and in medicine, and also is involved in data mining. So, Bart, the floor is yours. And of course, the title of the presentation is AI in Social Media, Opportunities and Challenges. Please.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. So first of all, thank you for having me. Also, warm thank you to the Belgian Embassy for making this possible for me to come here and address you. So I'd like to maybe open up with a question. Who among you has seen an AI-generated image or AI-generated videos, except for that one maybe, in the last couple of days? Right, quite a big raise of hands, so maybe that's good. Maybe the people who did raise their hands didn't notice anymore that's AI generated, which is the conundrum we're in sometimes. Oh, I see less and less AI generated stuff. Maybe, but maybe it's just becoming so good that you no longer can distinguish it, right? And I would like to specifically address how we use AI in social media in a very broad sense, and how that can be used for good or for bad additionally. Before getting into the topic, let me just briefly present myself. This is me in my standard uniform. So I'm affiliated with the Belgian Defense. So I come from the military academy, just like the ambassador, just 2 decades.
Thank you.
But shows that we're both still young, I presume. And so my background indeed is in engineering. I also have a PhD in business engineering and engineering sciences. And within the academy, we have two faculties, social and military science and engineering. I teach in both. And my research is mainly focusing on open source intelligence and social media and how we can use technology to harvest and collect information from those things to improve decision making, right? And in that context, our academy also collaborates extensively with our intelligence community. We have a partnership with our cyber commands. So we do try to make this technology transfer from academic research on one hand towards real world use cases on the other hand. Because there's a big bridge, as you may know, between academia and industry or operations. Okay, so what do I want to address with you today? Well, basically three broad themes. How is AI being used in social media in general, as we know it today? Then a quick detour on how this impacts our information space, also including some examples from the recent or very recent past. And then I'll end up with some reflections on, okay, maybe this is great, but what does this mean for us in the future? So this is a big overview of the different ways AI is already being used in social media today. Right? We'll just go over them in a counterclockwise way. So you have this notion of personalized content and these great recommendations, right? Sometimes also known as the algorithm. And TikTok is very driven in this. One day you're looking at a video of a specific topic, say you want a new washing machine, and all of a sudden you only see washing machines, right? That's AI at play. In a more classical form, not transformers, but just classic recommender systems. You look at patterns, the things you interact with, how they interact with, and that leads you to new and improved suggestions that keep you engaged with the platforms. And I definitely intend to use engaged and not interested, because engagement is relevant for the platforms. It drives revenue. It's not necessarily a good thing for your mental sanity. As you may have known, you can doom scroll or hate scroll or like on a platform, right? We've all been there maybe. That's not necessarily a good thing. Second way AI is being used, or third way, is the authenticity of content. You can use AI systems, and this is somewhat of a cat and mouse game, to continually use systems. Is this image, is this video AI generated or not? And these systems exist and they are in play. We also use them for real analyzing or detecting real persons. Like maybe if you had used an online bank, you needed to take some pictures of yourself in different positions or take some position to really verify that it's you. Well, that's also AI that's being used there to really assess this is a good person, a real person, right? And we're seeing more and more tentatives to circumvent these, right? So we're seeing people that try to use or abuse these systems. Right, the ambassador mentioned ChatGPT. It's maybe hard to believe that this just came online, the big platform for the broad public, just 2 years ago. Right? It's not very long. But this availability and then the extended democratization of large language models has led to a situation where we now have 24/7 customer support on online platforms that are able to answer questions, that are able to give you a summary of an article and then several other things. So that's great, as long as it works well, right? I think France had a big or small issue with this 1 or 2 weeks ago. They put this Lucy platform online, very proud, yay, France, let's go. And they had to take it offline in the following day or days because it generated a lot of false, misleading, or completely wrong information. So due diligence, testing, assessments still has a very big role and is sometimes a bit neglected. The interaction enhancements, you all know this. You're on Instagram and suddenly you're a dog. Great fun. Or you're looking prettier or uglier or older. All these things are available. That's amazing. That's deep learning and image processing at work. And this is really great fun to see how I might age or not, and then maybe confounding with other factors like excessive alcohol abuse, and then you look worse. Okay, great. Something that you might be more familiar with is content moderation, right? We can have these systems working on natural language processing to assess, hey, is this content does this include some form of hate speech? Is this not suited for publication? Does this contain illegal content? For example, child pornography is such a thing where we want to recognize these systems. That was also a very big debate within Europe recently, well, in the last couple of months. Will we deploy these systems? So that's something that's ongoing on. And then, in my opinion, and it was also alluded to in the introduction, the really big breakthrough and where it's really helpful is that AI really enables improved accessibility. Right? If you're looking at a video nowadays, you have seamlessly generated subtitles in your language that are decent, right? It's no longer the Google Translate from 10, 15 years ago. That's just rubbish. No, it just works, and it works out of the box. Right? And you can even go beyond. More and more content creators are even switching to automated translation that even clones the voice in a proper way. So you have even the same accent. So I would have my accent in French or Dutch or English would be transposed to German. And now I'm German speaking. Amazing, right? Because it just fits in the video and it all looks really natural, giving me as a content creator a much broader audience. So that is really, really nice. Of course, as you might expect, those are the upsides. Right? You might also think maybe this could be used for bad. Obviously, if you have these algorithms that tailor content to your needs, your interests, and your engagement, well, what we typically can see is that this leads to filter bubbles or echo chambers, right? You're only exposed to the information you choose to be exposed to, right? And that can be an issue because you're no longer faced with different opinions, with different perspectives, and that can really be a problem in a democratic country, for example. What we also have is this notion of transparency and bias. That was also alluded to in the introduction. So I picked up several points that I will come back to in one way or another. So that's great. But indeed, these algorithms are trained on data, and then basically they're used as a black box, more or less. I understood that my colleague will address it to some extent, transparency and explainable AI. So that's a thing that's ongoing. But most of the time, you really don't know what's happening underneath the hood of the system. Right? An additional issue you might have is the training data you use to train your models may also contain implicit biases that you may not be aware of, right? And thus this can put to a disadvantage certain topics, narratives, people, entire groups, which is something to be very, very aware of. I think the most obvious one, well, great, we have 24/7 customer service. But now I also have 24/7 agents acting on my behalf that can do some nefarious activity, that can try to shift the narrative in online discussion, that can continuously monitor new information, assess how this can be abused, and then put it back in the open web for people to be triggered. And this is a really big problem, in my opinion. Then hooray, I can be transformed into a unicorn in an image. But as we have seen, you can also create perfect voice clones. You can create perfect digital avatars of myself. Right? I had a discussion recently with one of my colleagues where I could say, hey, I could basically start a YouTube channel of me dancing and discussing about intelligence at the same time. And it might even work because people would like this content. But I could take a public figure and have the figure do something completely different. I can use a voice clone and have them say outrageous things. And yes, this will probably be debunked soon or very quickly, but the damage is already done. And it has been studied that false or misleading or outrageous information typically tends to travel faster than what the truth actually does. And so this is also a bit of an issue. And then due to the fact that I can simultaneously translate and make my content available to basically the entire world nowadays, that also means that I can push my hateful, deceitful content to basically every nation I want to target in a high quality way, right? Long gone are the days of the Nigerian prince that sends you an email in very bad Dutch or French in my case, right? Nowadays, you will get a perfect clone of your bank website that's perfectly credible, no single error, because you can just do it in a very, very professional way. And so some backsides of the medal definitely worth looking into. Okay, that was supposed to move. All right. Now that we have seen this outline of how AI is and can be used within social media, I would also like to highlight to some extent how this is being addressed by academia, industry, and show through some examples how this has been used or abused in the very recent past. This came out last year, so also the rapid rate of acceleration has been mentioned. This dates just from February last year, so a year ago, on the ICML International Conference on Machine Learning, where this specific paper was presented, right, on the societal impact of open foundation models. With the open foundation models, ChatGPT, for example, is closed. But we do have a lot of models, like the ones from Meta, Llama, and the whole set of families, to some extent the French ones from Mistral as well, and then a whole collection of Chinese models that you can just use freely and run locally without any content control whatsoever. Right, and they assessed the risk of what these models can do, and specifically, and it's what is mentioned on the right, like the marginal risk on society. Like, what could happen to society if we just let these models be used, or let these models be used? And they specifically addressed, identified certain risks: disinformation, spear phishing, cybersecurity, and all topics which can have a massive impact, and where we also lack a substantial amount of scientific research to back to what extent it can be dangerous, right? Because obviously you don't want to just do a disinformation campaign to see what happens, right? Very unethical thing to do. And additionally, they also highlighted that producing disinformation is no longer the issue. The content generation problem is solved, right? So the only thing we're currently still dealing with is how do we spread things across the web, across people, across the minds of the people, basically. To continue upon that, from the same month, also last year, two papers I want to highlight. One focusing on the persuasiveness of AI-generated propaganda. And this was purely focusing on text. And to summarize it, well, it's good for text. It can work. So hurrah, if you're into this theme. And it's only getting better, right? Every AI model you use nowadays is probably the worst one you will ever use. And we're on somewhat of an exponential curve. Second thing on the right is, other researchers also looked into the mobilizing power of visual media across social mediated protests. So it turns out, well, yes, obviously an image says more than 1,000 words, so images have the power to mobilize. But I now can also create high quality misleading images with high quality propaganda. I combine those, and you might come into a situation where the sum of the parts, well, the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. So this can, well, in the right hands, create some damage potentially. Continuing through the timeline of the past year, now we're in March. This is the communications of the ACM, so the Association for Computing Machinery. Those who read this magazine, any people in the room by chance? No? Okay, I used AI to transform the cover a bit. The titles that are remaining are true, but there was a big one in red above it that I just removed to make my point. What they highlighted, and it's written in big, is that we are now in a disinformation 2.0 period. Right? What are the characteristics of this disinformation 2.0 age? Well, everything is personalized. Right? If you can collect information, you can target on an individual level with content that triggers the person. Right? Again, you might think, if you're into propaganda. We have this issue of authenticity. it's becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish authentic content from fabricated content, which makes it hard. And then the third challenge is that basically everything can be created by AI. So we can scale this up at a massive rate, and then that really makes things problematic. Right? And you might say, well, what's new in this? Well, if you take a step back and what we have been doing, or observing rather, in terms of this information, typically you have people making the content. This gets pushed online, where one person may control 10, 20, 50 artificial accounts, right? Then the platforms might see it. This might be flagged in an automated or semi-automated way. There are still some humans in the loop. It gets pulled down, and then, okay, we're back at square one. But nowadays, this can be fully automated at scale, right? And if you do it right, you can really automate it at scale from hundreds of different IP addresses trying to get stay below the detection systems of the platforms. Then moving a bit further in time, this is last month, we had this international AI safety report that came out that also addresses a lot of the things I've already mentioned. And then in addition, these three items I laid out. So we have what is called the liar's dividend. And then just to make you understand what is meant or understood by this, imagine you work as a journalist and you found out some massive corruption scheme. Some politics have been, hiding money away or something. It gets found out. You publish it. You say, "Hey, I have this video. I have this image. This person is fraudulent." And politicians just open, "Oh, no, it's AI." And how can you prove that's still authentic? Right? And this is just the issue here. As we have this ability of generating more and more information and saturating the information space, distinguishing what is real from false becomes very difficult. Right? And how do we navigate this space where we have all this misleading information? Second challenge, and it's also one I'm personally struggling with a bit, is how do we quantify the effectiveness of all of this? Right? Because yes, we can generate this information at scale. And yes, we see it in basically every country in Europe and beyond. But it's very hard to measure the real impact on society of these things. And if you would want to do this according to the scientific method, well, then you would really have to do it. Meaning, you select a group. You have a control group, one of them is exposed, the other one is not. But obviously, no ethical committee nowhere in the world will ever approve this, right? So you're working with incomplete information. And then we have the policymaker's dilemma. The technical development rate is ever increasing, right? And at the same time, policymakers do realize that something has to be done, but we have to make our decisions in incomplete information. Right? You as a policymaker might say, "Oh, we need to do something," and you might take some measures, and eventually it may turn out, well, this is a measure for nothing. Okay. Or you don't do anything, and then something horrible happens, and then you're like, "Oh, yeah, maybe we should have done something." Right? So we're in this situation where you have a very rapid technical development. Something needs to be done, and you as a policymaker need to make a decision in incomplete information. And that's, I wouldn't want to be in a policymaker's shoes, honestly, especially not nowadays. Right, so that's with some overview from science. I just want to show you some examples from the last years, especially the one on the right, that have seen some major media uptake. So on the left, the Romanian right-wing TikTok president, right? These images obviously are AI generated, with a message pushing, no, it's not Russia the problem, it's Romania. Okay, I got a lot of uptake. At the bottom, you might see or interpret at least the depiction of Vladimir Putin. But if you look at it, well, if you just ignore Putin, it's basically a picture of a destroyed city. Right? And what is the technology that is used to do this? At its Sense is basically developed to make QR codes, right? You have a Chinese restaurant and you want to make a QR code that's composed of tiny pavilions, same technology, right? But you can definitely use this for some sort of psyop or pressure on a president or on information landscape. The one on the top, that was actually shared by the Ukrainian parliament in January last year after a bombing of Dnipro where tens of people died and then several others were wounded. Fully AI generated, right? You see the wounded child, you see the background, then you recognize the Ukrainian flag. Very emotional, so it really stirs up some really profound emotions, but fully AI generated, right? And this has some link with the liar's dividend, right? And the government was somewhat criticized for doing this because if you start using AI generated stuff in your own psychological warfare, if I can use that name, well then you could also discredit yourself, right? Like, oh, you're sharing fake stuff. If this is fake, all the rest you're spreading or all the other information you're spreading might also be fake, right? So that's delicate balance. And then on the one on the right, you might recognize him as well, Frans Timmermans, Dutch/Euro politician from the Green Party. Here seen allegedly enjoying a hefty lunch in a private jet, which kind of goes in opposition of his, well, degrowth and don't go excessive on spending and pleasuring yourself. This was used especially mainly in the Netherlands. Mainly, obviously, by right-wing groups to discredit him and depict him as a caviar socialist, saying, "Yeah, okay, do what I say, but not what I do." Right? And I can imagine you have similar examples from Croatia as well. So that's images. Am I fine?
Try now.
Yes. Right. So yeah, next up is video. Who hasn't seen this Sora from OpenAI? Right. So this is also a year ago. We had OpenAI release a video or video generating system. Basically, you put in text and it generates a video. Great, amazing. Closed system, nonetheless. You can use it nowadays, but maybe still not in Europe. I'm always using VPNs to do this, but okay, so that's February. And just to show you how far we've come, a single month later, and to illustrate that China is definitely a force to be reckoned with, we had this. The sound is missing, so sorry for that. It's a technical thing. But what they did there, so this is the Alibaba group. Just a month later, they basically took a snapshot from this video, combined it with an interview of the, at the time, CTO of OpenAI, Mira Murati, and then we have this digital persona at the right, where we have the mouth movement, the audio, and the full voice clone just perfectly on point. And that's in March, that's over a year ago, right? You can imagine where we are now. Also, to extend the situation a bit more internationally, India in 2024 also saw heavy use of AI-generated campaign material and or others. So we had a couple of nice ones, like Prime Minister Modi dancing. This is clearly a deepfake with Vigil, but this circulated a lot on social platforms, and memes and meme culture is often used in a humoristic way to spread even the most heinous things on social platforms. So it is an important vector of information. Other nice things they did, and Belgium also did this last year. They resuscitated a deceased person, so brought back from the grave. So I forgot the name now, but the person on the top there is basically deceased, but came back to do an interview. In Belgium, we did the same. CD&V did it, I think, with former Prime Minister Jean-Luc Dehaene, who basically came back and also gave a speech. Very strange, but we can do it. And maybe even more surreal, we had this politician, Dr. Sashi Tharoor, doing an interview with his own AI clone.
great for fun. It spreads like wildfire. So that's definitely a thing that was used. I mentioned the phone. What was also done is at scale, AI calls were done to normal citizens with a clone of their alleged representative to have a discussion with them and to engage with them to help them turn out to vote. This is also something we've seen in the US, right? It was the other way around. In half a year or a year ago, something similar was done. US citizens were called en masse and to be discouraged for voting for Joe Biden. So technology is out there. And then, yeah, well, obviously, horrible things were also done. So a massive campaign of AI-generated anti-Muslim sentiment was also being spread on Meta's platforms in India as well, which stayed online for quite some time, which cost some of us. To show you how we are evolving, well, the last two platforms I just showed you in terms of video, well, they are somewhat closed, right? You don't have full control, but more and more this is being made available at very low costs, right? Here we have an example of 10 different video generating tools that basically need to, or were asked to generate a woman dressed in red to touch the face of a mirror, which is a very hard thing to do because you have the reflection and everything and needs to work out. You can clearly see that all of them are basically rubbish, but we're getting there and it's evolving and it's increasingly easy to run things like this locally. And just because we can, we're in February, this is last week, Pika released this additions feature where you can basically add anything or anyone in a video. So here we have on the left, right, this person is explaining something and out of this AI avatar can do a high five with the thing, with the person. You can also add this small, cute little critter on the table. And that's, well, fun to do, but you can imagine the possibilities when you don't have any moral values. Right? And then because, well, we now have the AI week and Macron basically posted this himself. We have this video of Emmanuel Macron being in every possible situation. And he addressed that he really liked this. And this is great as long as it's being used for humoristic or amusement purposes. Right? If you go beyond, you can also have Macron saying other stuff. And so it's a very, very tricky balance to have. And in the end, it's like MacGyver or something. It's like, okay, this is cool. This is really. Well, we don't have the sound. Okay, so there's a couple of things to be said here in terms of reflection and challenges. A couple of things I highlighted. The top row is basically targeted or seen from a research perspective. It has become increasingly hard for us researchers to get data to work with. Facebook has shut down CrowdTangle. Meta, since Musk took over, X, since Musk took over, no longer gives you access to data. So whatever data people are working on is typically old and predates to some extent the capabilities that exist nowadays. This in turn hampers validation and testing of new systems because yes, you can test on a benchmark, but the proof of the pudding is always in the eating, so you really need to test it in present day scenarios. And then even if you arrive to detect this information is ongoing, this still begs the question, okay, great, but how do I undo the damage, right? How do I know what audience has been reached? And how do I intervene in a way that is efficient to get them back on track? Then on the bottom, we have this duality of rate of development and the role of government. Development, as you have seen throughout the presentation, happens on a timescale of days or weeks, whereas the role of government happens on a timescale of months or years. And I think I'm being somewhat optimistic in that domain. So that is a very, very big challenge. And as I mentioned, also government doesn't always fully understand what is technically possible and what all of this entails. Just like the people working in AI don't always perceive possible societal impacts. Well, this really is a big challenge between these two things. And then I think this the other two bubbles really care to Belgium and then Croatia and other smaller nations to some extent in Europe. I have this notion of cultural awareness. It's not because I can nowadays have perfectly translated content. If I come from Belgium with a video and I translate it and I start trying to push it in Croatia, it will probably fail, right? You have other cultural habits. There are subtleties that I'm normally, well, now I'm not aware of. Me as a person, I'm definitely not aware of. So I would need some reinforcement in my team to make this work. And in terms of the development of AI, a lot of these great big platforms, they're focused on languages that have a very broad reach, right? You have English, that's really good. Chinese is great nowadays. You have well, the set of languages covering India that are quite okay. Then French and German to some extent, and then it slowly goes down from there. So I do believe that there's still a lot of opportunities to be had in terms of development, both including cultural perspectives, but also the linguistic subtleties for all the smaller nations in Europe. And this was also addressed to some extent in this week's AI summit, that really Europe needs to all come together and develop these things on its own level. I would also like to highlight some contradictions in terms of all of this, right? A couple of months ago, NSA, FBI, and CISA, so the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the US, they make a big report. Okay, Gen AI basically is a danger. It's a high risk. Well, it can be used to threaten an organization, impersonate people, as I've mentioned, give you access to networks and so forth. Okay, warning message, dearly noted. However, right, US itself has ran a disinformation campaign targeting Southeast Asia with a specific message that the Chinese vaccines were not good for the COVID pandemic. The US has been involved in using sock puppets for online interference since 2011. Right? And just this year, you have JSOC, so the Joint Special Operations Command, that seeks to have this technical capability, full AI-generated profiles that can circumvent every control system. They want these high-quality digital persona ready at scale. So this is somewhat of a contradiction. At one hand, you say, you should do this. And at the other hand, yeah, but we do need a capability. Right? So maybe, yes, it's a threat as long as it's somebody else. And I find this an interesting observation. And the US is not the only country in this situation, by the way. Right? Also the values and morals and national security, it's always a delicate balance. Oh, great. So is all lost? Oh, no, I don't think so. Going from here, I think a lot of things can and should be done. In terms of horizon scanning, for example, it's very important that the nation and organizations keep aware of what is happening, what is being developed, and how it can be used for good and maybe also for bad. This information should be shared between nations, partners, and institutions that can be transnational. Because if you know what techniques, tactics, and procedures are being used and you share this, well, then you can develop protections against it. Education, in my opinion, has a massive role. In Belgium, we unfortunately are seeing our education level slowly going down over the last couple of years. But education, I think, is really an important element in this whole discussion. If you can, from the get-go, get your citizens being aware that not only this exists, but that you can train them in critical thinking and verifying information, that's very much helpful. If you can even go further and show them what can be done, it's another step. And that brings me to this notion of red teaming. So red teaming is basically taking all the systems that are available and seeing what can I do with this? How could I potentially abuse it or weaponize it? Because if you know what can be done, then you can also try to build defenses against it. And this can be pushed further. And we have this idea of pre-bunking and inoculating our citizens. And that's something that's being invested in some countries. Taiwan, for example, is doing this a lot, where basically they share AI-generated information or disinformation campaigns towards their citizens, but it's really clear message like, hey, this is not real, but just to get them used to it and don't take everything at face value to help them think. This is something that has also been deployed in Europe at a small scale, but needs more investigation to really assess how well it works. And here the cultural dimension is also really important, because it's not because something works in China, for example, that will work in Europe. And the same goes, by the way, for AI applications in the medicine world, because a lot of Chinese models are being used also for medical AI, but they don't translate to Europe because we have different morphology to some extent. So this isn't just only for mind games, it's broader than just that. And then finally, maybe the elephant in the room is the multidisciplinary collaboration. Right? Technology is one thing, but technology will definitely not solve all problems. In the information space and in the social media platforms, the human, we as humans, we're still at the center of everything. So you do need the humanities and the social sciences together with the technical people to really make sense of it all, to see what works, what should work, and to be able to help explain you why some things don't. And so don't forget the human in this system. Coming from an engineer, that might be strange, but I'm fully convinced that this needs to be done, and it's also how I try to work back at home. Right. So just to wrap things up, evolution is going really fast, but maybe the question that we should ask ourselves is, is it going too fast, or should we ask ourselves the question, how can we keep up? Because evolution will happen whether we want it, regulate it or not. We'll just have to deal with it in one way or another. And then just for joke, all these people are obviously AI generated. Right? So should you have any questions on this specifically or broader, I will try my best to answer them as much as I can. Thank you.
If you have any questions, we have not much space, but it's 5 to 10 minutes. So if you want to ask a question, no? We have one.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the very interesting presentation. My name is Georgia. I'm from Georgia. It's like a music. I'm from the Embassy of Georgia. And I had a chance to read the Georgia's Innovation and Technology Agency a few years ago. We are discussing about the AI possibilities, and there is one huge question that we could not find the answer yet. This is a legal part. Is AI responsible legally for the actions or decisions it makes or not? Definitely we say, no, AI is not a human and the legal environment is not covering IT infrastructure. Hence, AI is making decisions and we are a little bit confused if the decisions are made by the... Okay, like this?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, super. We don't need technology. Okay. And this, because of this, the question is, what is your opinion, your expertise and opinion about the legal part of the AI development? Thank you.
Okay, so the easy answer would just be open my umbrella and say, I have an expert from Belgium, from the legal branch coming in an hour. But that being said, it's very application dependent. And just as an example, and this is purely from academia, like at the academy, we allow our students to use AI tools or whatever, but they bear the final responsibility of whatever's in their texts. Right? So that's final responsibility if they're still put with the end user. For decision-making systems, it can help, but there too, the responsibility is still with the end user. And depending on other applications, like if you're going into offensive use of generative AI, for example, then it really depends from nation to nation, I believe, what legal mandate you do have. Because I think this is the case in most countries. Intelligence services typically have a different mandate than what normal citizens can do. A normal citizen will be put into jail, whereas special inquiry methods for police, intelligence work, have some other coverage. I know that this doesn't fully answer your question, but yeah, I'm definitely not a legal expert. And even in AI, I'm not an expert in AI, I would say, because that's saying like as a doctor, I'm an expert in medicine. And you all know that you wouldn't want to have your eyes checked out by somebody who normally works on toes or feet, right?
No, it's
okay. Thank you very much. I just wonder, is there any research being done on the effects of inbreeding? Because at the end, the AI looks for information all over the places. And of course, a lot of information in the past has been generated by humans, but now it has been generated more and more by machines.
Yeah.
So at a certain moment, it becomes an incestuous relationship.
Yeah.
So is there some, do we know what effect that can generate on the longer term?
Yeah, I think it can, especially for us as mere simple mortals, just pollute the entire information space, making it, especially for us, more difficult to get the proper information. However, there's an upside to this, like in training more performant large language models. We are also seeing that artificially generated data is being used more and more. So, and there it actually works well, but it's no longer like the vacuum cleaner approach where you just take in everything. More and more companies and people are realizing that high quality data still has some sway over just high amounts of data.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, just short. We have some new research connected to synthetic data and the impact, and there is one phrase connected to that. It's called the knowledge collapse. Just in short. So yeah, we do have some research already, and we will have to be very careful about that, because if you feed only with the synthetic data, then one of the potential consequences is called the knowledge collapse.
And what does it mean exactly, the knowledge collapse?
It would take some, but it is what it sounds like. If you just feed it with synthetic data, which is kind of in the loop created by itself, then the final, let's just put it like this, the final outcome, if I understood, is not going to be very good.
Can I add something to that as a physicist? Basically,
he's connected to this.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Basically, your question is excellent, because we know for the last 2 years that we are basically approaching a horizon. Most of human knowledge has been digitalized, and we had an honor last year in Croatia. We were visited by Mark Turner, mathematician, linguist, who is actually investing a lot of time and knowledge into actually building a training set by humans that can be utilized in pushing the boundary of large language models. And he says, like, when a prodigy, like a student comes, he says, like, I don't care if you are expert in AI, can you code in PyTorch, in TensorFlow, do you understand mathematics? I'm a linguist, and actually creating a good test training validation set is an art. Why is OpenAI so good in physics? Because it has huge training set. It can actually now approximate a PhD student in physics and solve vast amounts of data or problems or whatever. I can give it a problem on the level of graduate student in physics, and it will solve it in 2 minutes. If it's even 90% correct, it's enough for human to assess it. But what is the problem? The problem is so-called AI slop. Now the internet is polluted by image generators, by the fake texts, by the texts that don't have actually any meaning. And when we say knowledge collapse, I would look at this as a point of statistical physics. You always have phase transition, water, ice, something like that. And the thing that we have with this is not connected to the fundamental sciences. It's more connected to the language, to the structured knowledge, and to building actually quality knowledge base. And there is no easy solution. As you said, the evolution is happening quickly. On one side, we have talks like we are hitting a wall, but I would just remind you of one technical thing. 5 years ago, everybody was talking about LSTMs, about RNNs. Now you open a modern textbook about understanding deep learning, which is actually a small niche in machine learning. Nobody discusses this model anymore. So the frontier is pushing, the capabilities of algorithms pretty, quickly, and we will see. Basically what we think today is knowledge collapse or knowledge pollution. Well, who is best curator wins the game.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bart. Now our next speaker is Marko Močkov, Assistant Professor in the Division of Biochemistry at Department of Chemistry and Faculty of Science at University of Zagreb. And the title of his presentation is AI and Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So I will come. Okay, so I will cover a somewhat less controversial topic. How is the artificial intelligence transforming the field of life sciences? So I'm a biochemist, so for the general public, I probably should explain something about what the proteins are, so you could follow the presentation. So proteins are the macromolecules which in biochemistry and life science get the job done. So they do the most of biochemical roles. For example, the animal fur is made of proteins. Our skin, which represents a barrier between our organism and surrounding, is also made of proteins. Our hair as well. But the red color of our blood also is dependent on the proteins because the hemoglobin, the protein which binds and transfers the oxygen in our blood, is of red color. Then the proteins give shape to our cells, and the proteins also enable our muscles to contract, and the proteins are responsible for our ability to move around. Proteins help pack DNA into the chromosomes and in the cellular nucleus. So how do proteins look like? Well, they are very different, come in very different shapes and types. Most of proteins are globular, like this one. This is rubisco. It's a plant protein which is responsible for fixing CO2 into the carbohydrates. So it's one of the most abundant enzymes in the biosphere. Some proteins are helical strands, like keratin, which makes up our hair, our skin, hooves, and so on. Then we have, for example, immunoglobulin, which is part of our immune system of our defense against pathogens, which has this strange Y shape. But again, you can see globular domains linked with these flexible linkers. Then we have DNA polymerase, the enzyme responsible for DNA synthesis, which has this peculiar shape of the horseshoe or of the human palm. So as you can see, the proteins are very diverse in terms of their shape and also of their function. At the end, the enzymes, biocatalysts, which catalyze chemical reactions in our bodies, are also proteins, and they catalyze these complicated chemical reactions which actually represent life. So as you can see, the proteins perform very different and almost all the tasks in biological systems. So how the proteins are built up? The protein consists of these simple blocks we call the amino acids, and these simple compounds, amino acids, link into long linear polymers we call the polypeptides. Regarding their covalent shape, their covalent structure, proteins are rather simple macromolecules. They're actually linear polymers. But these linear polymers can take up different conformations. At the end, they fold into very intricate and very complicated irregular shapes. And this scheme represents just the backbone of this protein. Bear in mind that on atomic scale, this is a structure composed of several thousands of atoms, but we usually use such more simplified schematic representation because this is way too complicated to comprehend. So now we come to so-called protein folding problem. So how these linear polymers take up these complicated shapes in space. Very early, we realized that this three-dimensional shape of the protein, which is responsible for its function and which defines how the protein works, is dependent solely on its amino acid sequence. Is dependent solely on the amino acids which build this protein. But on the other hand, we realized quite early that the conformational space that's available to this polypeptide chain, to this polymer, it's enormous. So this is the basis of so-called Lennington paradox, that even for relatively small protein of only 100 amino acids, if this protein was about to explore every possible conformation, it would take ages to find the correct or the native one, and that would take longer than the history of the universe, because the conformational space is so huge. Of course, this did not stop researchers and scientists to question and to explore how this conformation forms. And nowadays we understand a lot about the forces and the principles which govern the protein structure, but we were still unable to reliably predict the protein structure, because the interactions that govern this protein folding were numerous and difficult to model precisely. And there is a huge motivation to do that. I would say there are two main reasons why we would like to be able to predict the protein structure. First is the basic or fundamental one. We want to understand how these important macromolecules work. We want to be able to understand how they take up their native structure. And also there is one very important practical reason. And the practical reason is that the experimental determination of the protein structure, it's very difficult. It usually takes several months to several years to determine the structure of a single protein, and you need very sophisticated facilities. You need access to cyclotron, that's a type of particle accelerator, and cyclotrons are very expensive facilities, so there are only a few tens of them in the world. Here you see the one from the European Synchrotron radiation facility in Grenoble. So the synchrotron is this circular, it's located in this circular building. So it's a huge machine. Well, not like the one in CERN, but still. Recent years, there was a lot of progress in the field of cryo-electron microscopy, but these dedicated electron microscopes, which allows you to actually see the proteins, are also quite expensive and inaccessible to ordinary academic institutions. So in the databases, thanks to the advances in DNA sequencing, we have many protein sequences known, but we have only a handful of protein structure solved, several orders of magnitude less than the known sequences. So it would be great if we could predict the protein structure from their sequence. And people have tried, and this is the active area of the research for many decades. And in the year 1994. A project called Critical Assessment of Protein Structure Prediction was started. This is a kind of competition or challenge which takes place every other year, where different groups get the targets. The targets are announced for which the structures have been solved, but the structures are not released to the public. And the interested parties have a few months available to try to predict how this protein look like, and then the results are compared, and they see who fares best. So the first sparks of what's going on happened in 2018, when the AlphaFold, let's say, win this competition. When AlphaFold from the Google-owned company DeepMind has shown the best results, but the real revolution began in 2020, when the AlphaFold 2 in this CAST competition swept the competitors, but not only it was shown to be the best algorithm, but even more shockingly, the results it produced were almost as good as the experimental results. So in some point, because the experimental structures also have some experimental uncertainties, you cannot be sure if the little differences you observe Are they the consequence of the algorithm imperfections, or the model is actually as good as the experimental data, because the experimental data is also a bit uncertain. And here you can see different pictures of how good the protein backbone or the details of the protein structure overlap with the experimentally solved structures. And this is the graph from the 2020, which shows how much better the AlphaFold was from all the rest of the competition. How did they achieve this? Well, I will not go into the details, but they used the latest development in the neural networks. And these deep neural networks were fed with they're fed with a sequence, and the prediction relied on two major contributions. The first is the solved structures available in the public databases, and the second thing is this vast sequence data, also available in different databases, from which you can deduce the evolutionary information and which parts of the protein co-evolve. So these parts of the proteins which co-evolve hides the information which parts of the proteins are actually in close spatial proximity. And the people behind this vast improvement is the people from the DeepMind company. So the Nobel Prize was awarded to Demis Hassabis, the co-founder of the DeepMind, and John Jumper, who is a computational biochemist. So they joined forces and expertise, which allowed to design this sophisticated system for protein structure prediction. And this discovery was followed by huge development in the field, because since the beginning, they shared the information how they did it. So they made public how their system works, which principles it uses, and so on. And in 2021, they released the code and published the paper on AlphaFold 2. So that AlphaFold 2. So this sparked the whole revolution in the field. It was followed by the similar system from academia, from the group of David Baker. In a way, they reverse engineered the AlphaFold approach, because even before the publication, as I said, they did not keep secret as they did. Then there was then the ColabFold was developed. It's a freely available system which everyone can use. And to move fast forward, in 2024, AlphaFold 3 was released, which even further advanced the field and prediction capabilities. So as you can see, this discovery was quickly picked up by the field, and it was immediately recognized as a major breakthrough. And in the year 2021, the Science magazine has chosen the AlphaFold 2 as the breakthrough the year, because its significance was immediately recognized. But we can also talk about the inverse protein folding problem. So the inverse protein folding problem would be, okay, if we imagine a protein structure, can we devise the protein sequence which will fold into desired structure? And as David Baker nicely put, if you want to build an and so this is also a real test of your understanding of the first principles. So as David Baker nicely said, if you want to build an airplane, you don't start by modifying a bird. Instead, you understand the first principles of aerodynamics and build flying machines from those principles. And as you know, modern airplanes do not imitate birds in their ability to fly. So in a way, this is an complementary approach to this protein prediction problem. So you start with the desired structure and you try to design the amino acid sequence which will take up this protein structure. And David Baker actually won the Nobel Prize for his work, which precedes the application of artificial intelligence to de novo protein design. He was able to design, and he was successful in designing different kind of folds, and this advancement is also truly amazing. But as and I will skip such examples, and as artificial intelligence was applied to the problem of protein prediction, he quickly adopted a similar approach, let's say it in reverse, to design novel proteins. And algorithms he developed are quite similar to the algorithms which are used to generate artificial intelligent pictures. So this algorithm starts by random noise, and drive this random noise, and then they denoise this random noise to desired imaginary. In a similar way, the generative artificial intelligence systems for de novo protein design work. So this is shown in this animation. You start with random atomic coordinates of amino acids, and then you denoise them to the something which looks very alike to a normal protein. And they were hugely successful with this approach. So you can start with such random coordinates and get totally novel proteins, but you also can guide the process into the design of symmetric proteins or protein binders, or you can incorporate some desired symmetric motifs in your proteins, and so on. And of course, that would not mean a lot without experimental validation. So they validated their predictions first by feeding the AlphaFold 2 with devised sequences, and the AlphaFold 2 predicted very similar structures as the proteins were designed to take. But they also validated these structures experimentally. So they produced these proteins. They determined their structure by trio electron microscopy, and shapes and envelopes they obtained were consistent with the folds they have designed, and also they were able to confirm that also they have functional properties that they intended. So in the last year, the field moves very fast forward. Now you can include in your models the small molecules as well, nucleic acids and so on, metal ions, both in the prediction of the protein structures, and also you can design proteins which will find your non-protein targets such as drugs or ligands or whatever comes to your mind. So to sum it up, the application of artificial intelligence in the field of life science was transformative. Nothing is going to be the same anymore, and since now we have access to the structure of basically any protein that comes to your mind. So just a few years ago, we had only about 100,000 protein structures. Now you basically have the structure of all these sequences. If you know the sequence nowadays, you know the structure. So that's a huge change for the field. And as I said, the structure defines the properties and the function of the proteins. So many compare this breakthrough to the sequencing of the human genome. So there are a few things we can discuss, some questions which rise. For example, has the protein folding problem been solved? Well, that depends very much on what you actually mean and how precisely you phrase the question. So if the question, is related to practical approaches, to practical purposes, the answer is yes. As I said, these predictions are so good that very often they are indistinguishable from the experimental structures. So they are good to work for the most applications. But as I mentioned, we want to fundamentally understand what governs and what defines the protein structure. So if you mean, do we now understand the very fundamental, the very fundaments of protein folding? Well, then the answer is probably no, because some people think that these deep neural networks actually do understand how protein folding works, because they go beyond imitation of the training data set. We do know that the training data set is incomplete regarding what's there in the universe of protein sequences, and yet they produce very good models. So they are capable predicting structures of the proteins which are not represented in the data set. But this information and these physical principles cannot simply be extracted from the neural networks because of the very nature of how this system works. So does this advancement represent the death of structural biology? Well, actually, no, because quite contrary. Now you have a vast amount of structural data which needs to be put in use. So the revolution in structural biology probably is just beginning. But the question is now, do we really need such expensive facilities, such expensive equipment, and to which extent, and what is justified to be experimentally solved, which means invested a lot of money to people and resources and so on, to actually get the real experimental structure, because a lot of this stuff can be done now in silico. So, as a biochemist, a great time is ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco, very much. Now we have some time for questions. We have two here. Elaine, I was the first.
Thanks. My question is the following. Actually, it's a question from my husband. He asked me to ask you this. What about synthetic life? Because if this has become so easy to find out how proteins fold, and we know from Jacob Creutzfeldt's disease that that's the difference between life and death, and this has now actually just been, it's a computational problem, right? You don't need expensive resources. What is stopping some very evil people from making proteins that basically render, human, animals and humans and, well, dead. I mean,
yes.
Chemically dead.
Yes. To my opinion, that's a huge threat. And that's a question for the guys from the military. But yes, as everything else, you can make this, you can put this thing in use for the good causes, and you can use it for the evil causes. So it's easy to design dangerous protein toxins and so on, which would be fully synthetic, which would be unseen in the nature, and for which non-natural defenses would exist. But you mentioned something, but you first mentioned the synthetic life. This is something that was mentioned in media few days or a few weeks ago. That kind of threat, I would say, is still far away on horizon, because to create a synthetic life, you will need to create several thousands of these components, of these enzymes, of these proteins, and make them work together. Also, in line with this question, there is a good question of what actually is life, and what is the minimal set of such interactors which would possess all the characteristics of a living cell of or life itself. So these are very interesting questions, but these questions, I would say, do not pose an immediate threat.
So
So I'm very happy to have a chance to ask an expert about this. So if I remember correctly, the title of the article about AlphaFold in Nature was "It will change everything in medicine." Right? So then there was one claim that I heard on one conference by the representatives of Google, and I just want to test it with you just to have a confirmation, is it true or not, because I kind of repeated it on some of my lectures. So basically what they said is that this research on AlphaFold saved, which is something completely crazy for most of the people. If I would ask them here to kind of to predict how much time did we save, nobody would come to that number. So what they said is it saved 1 billion years of research, right? So their equation is relatively straightforward. It's number of proteins, 200 million proteins, times the amount of time that you need one PhD researcher to discover one protein. So it's 5 years, what they estimate. So it's like 200 million proteins times 5 years. So it's like kind of 1 billion years that is saved. Is this something that makes sense? Is this some kind of number that is kind of okay, or this is some kind of PR, let's just say, overestimation?
It's something in between. It's plausible. Can you please give back the presentation?
Because I mean, this speaks immensely about the impact of artificial intelligence, right? Nobody could kind of
it's definitely a huge impact, and I'm glad you asked this question, because as I said, we have about 100,000 proteins solved. For each of these proteins, you needed, okay, you can approximate it with one PhD student, or even better approximation would be a research group, a research team. And yes, for each this protein, you probably invested several months at least to several years. So a PhD student maybe produced one, maybe produced 20 structures, but still he doesn't work on his own. And as I said, you also need very expensive infrastructure. So, okay, it's an estimate. So one can debate, is it one order of magnitude more or less, but
maybe it was 200,000 protein structures times 5 years, so it's 1 million years, maybe, if you're just counting.
It's probably 5 years multiplied by all the proteins known on the level of the sequence, and this sequence translated to the three-dimensional models, and it also has a huge practical impacts, especially this AlphaFold 3, because AlphaFold 3 and similar systems can model the interactions with small molecules. That means drugs and medicines. Nowadays, every medicine and every drug you take, you actually want to know what it does and how it functions. So it's a huge deal if you can get a model in few minutes, and a reliable one, a reliable model, or you have to invest few months to few years to just see if it sits in the active site and then start to develop the therapeutic. So yes, it has very huge impact and very practical impacts. And that's linked to one controversy. So when they released the AlphaFold 3, which is capable of including these non-protein parts, this one was not made public, and it was not even made available to reviewers. So there was a huge backslash of, okay, nice work, guys, but this is not how the science works. How can we trust you?
Thanks for the answer.
You're welcome.
Any other?
Well, Marco, thank you very much once again. break and we will start at noon. So we have 15 minutes, not half an hour, which is even better. Yeah. So I think there is some topics we want to help themselves.
I got a bunch of sparring.
To je bilo jako dobro, a uz neku zatvorenu prezentaciju je vam available ili niste
hundreds of questions.
Just go to civit.ai and key in Anna and Elsa and remove adult. Frozen. You know about site Civit.ai? The publicly available models that everybody can use.
Yeah.
So we are going to proceed with our second part of the gathering. It was planned that Jan de Bruyne will be our next speaker from the Catholic University Leuven Institute for Artificial Intelligence from Belgium, but he got flu, so we have a replacement from the same institution. This is his colleague, Andrea Palumbo. So Andrea Palumbo is here. Yeah, he is. So thank you very much for popping in such a short notice time, and the floor is yours, Andrea.
Thank you very much. So, as announced, my name is Andrea Palumbo. I work at the Center for IT and IP Law, the Faculty of Law of Leuven. I'm a colleague of Jan, and he was sick today, so he asked me to present on the AI Act. I will now share the presentation with you. Can you still see the presentation? Yes. Okay, perfect. So, as I was saying, I work at the Center for IT and IP Law. Today I will be presenting on the AI Act and the regulatory approach of the European Union to artificial intelligence. I will try to, well, the Act will deserve several hours of presentation, so I will try to be brief and focus on key points to convey a message, key messages about how the European Union decided to regulate artificial intelligence. As you can see here from the outline, the level of contents of my presentation, I will set the scene. Then I would like to introduce the AI Act and its structure. And then I would like to have a focus on some key provisions that relate to fundamental rights and fundamental rights protection, which I believe is a very interesting and novel aspect of the AI Act from a legal perspective, at least. And then I will offer my concluding remarks. So, CITIB, just to give a very brief introduction, it's a center with it's a very big center that works on intellectual property and ICT law. We are more than 95 researchers, and we work on several projects funded by both national and EU bodies. We also organize core management course, an advanced LLM, and we have several research lines. You can see here a quick overview. We have a team that is focusing on AI and data. Me personally, I focus on research and project-related work on artificial intelligence, and I work on projects on related to the development of trustworthy AI models. So I work with technical partners, computer scientists, and assist them in the training of AI models and in the design of AI systems to ensure that they are compliant with EU law. So I will start by setting the scene, regulating AI. So first of all, just to give some notions about approaches to regulation in Europe. Before adopting the AI Act, there was the question, should we regulate artificial intelligence and how? To give a brief overview in legal scholarship, legal and also non-legal and more generally social scholarship, there have been different ideas about how you regulate technology, and these ideas have also been have also played a role, have also been part of the debate before the in the debates leading to eventually to the legislative proposal of the AI Act and its adoption. There was the idea of technological determinism, and that sees technological evolution as autonomous and neutral. There is an idea of technological instrumentalism, that you have to use technology as an instrument to achieve a certain goal, and that sees technology as neutral. technological system. It sees technology as not neutral, but as an independent force with its own substantive values that can subjugate objects and subjects of society. And in critical theory, that sees technology as non-neutral but value-driven, and in particular with AI, indeed, it is a type of technology that can incorporate, can embed values and policies. And it's also seen as a socio-technical system that indeed is shaped also by its interactions with humans. And this was just a very quick overview. I will not spend much time talking about these theories, but just so you know that before deciding to regulate artificial intelligence, people were wondering, what is artificial intelligence? How can it affect society? Is it a technology that can embed values, human values, and how? And which are the societal implications of deploying artificial intelligence? So just to give a table with an overview of different theories that had a key role in debates. And also, I will talk today about the AI Act, but when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's also more a very multidisciplinary topics. And when you do research, you have to take into account the interaction between different fields of law and also different disciplines beyond law, but also including computer science and political science that come into place when you want to discuss or address an issue related to AI regulation. And this makes the field very complicated, which is why there are many projects funded by the European Commission and national bodies in where we're conducting interdisciplinary research. So personally, I'm involved in a project where I work with AI ethicists, computer scientists, computation experts, and we all provide, and me, of course, I participate as a legal partner, and we will provide different perspectives to address issues pertaining to that can arise in the development of an AI model and then eventually an AI system. And also, you have different initiatives globally that interact with each other. So I will today talk about the AI Act, but before legislation, we had different policy documents and documents about ethics guidelines that were trying to lay down principles on trustworthy AI, explaining what trustworthy AI is and which should be the key characteristics they should have. So first we had policy documents and statements about the ethics of AI systems, and then afterwards we started to have different regulatory frameworks and pieces of legislation that have been adopted across the world, such as in the US, in China, we have the interim measures, in Europe, where you have the AI Act. And these measures, they often also tend to converge on main principles. For instance, even between the interim measures adopted in China and the AI Act, you see that they both talk about protecting intellectual property rights, protecting fundamental rights, fairness, transparency. And of course, these convergences happen because before these pieces of legislation, we also had policy documents by the United Nations, OECD, international organizations that defined a common framework to regulate artificial intelligence. But here today we're talking about the AI Act. Before the AI Act, we had the institutions that issued statements and policy documents saying how they would like to regulate artificial intelligence. Then we had a very influential document by the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence promoted by the European Commission. This group actually issued several documents, but the most influential is probably the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, which greatly influenced also the contents of the AI Act. And after all these policy documents that were the prototypes, the first ideas on how to regulate AI in Europe, we had the proposal of the European Commission in 2021. We had a very long and I would say difficult legislative procedure with many debates and diverging views. and many changes to the original proposal of the European Commission that have been made by the European Parliament and the Council, and then finally we had the final the approval of the regulation quite recently, and it is not also entirely applicable yet. It is already into force, but not all the provisions of the AI Act already apply, and then a parallel initiative to regulate AI in Europe has been the Council of Europe Convention that I will talk about later, because it is also relevant in relation to the AI Act. So what is the key characteristic of the AI Act and how it wants to regulate AI? It is the risk-based approach. The EU legislator decided to regulate AI using a risk-based approach. So basically imposing different provisions, different requirements based on the type of AI system and the context of deployment, and in light of the risks, the different risks that are posed to fundamental rights or a number of protected values because of the type of AI system or its context of deployment. So the AI Act has a predefined list of categories of AI systems, and each category corresponds to a different level of risk. And depending on the category where the AI system or model fits, you have different requirements that apply, and therefore a different approach to regulate them. We start from the top of the pyramid here with unacceptable risk. Basically, this relates to a number of uses of AI systems that are considered unacceptable and are therefore prohibited because they can violate your fundamental rights and values. Then you have high-risk AI systems that are considered very risky. We talk about applications that are considered very risky, but are not prohibited, but not always prohibited. They're just just subject to several requirements, and these requirements are aimed at ensuring that the risks that they pose to have safety and fundamental rights are minimized. AI systems that pose risks in relation to transparency because they interact with humans. And then there are also, talking minimum risk category, these are the systems that are not regulated at all by the AI Act. And then we also have a specific section for general purpose AI models. And here again, you have two categories based on risk. General purpose AI models with normal risk, let's say, and general purpose AI models with systemic risks, and different provisions apply. So before I go into these categories, well, it all starts from the definition of an AI system. And this is actually a very difficult definition. It has been difficult for legislators to agree on a definition. It is difficult to interpret the definition, but also we have guidelines that have been issued by the European Commission on how to understand this definition that has been given in the AI Act. I will just here outline the main aspects of this definition given in the AI Act. So an AI system is a machine-based system that operates with varying levels of autonomy, that can exceed adaptiveness after deployment, and that for explicit or implicit objectives can infer from the input how to generate outputs. That can be predictions, content, recommendations, decisions. And these outputs can in turn influence physical or virtual environments. And of course, if you want to know more about this about the definition, I recommend to look at the guidelines that have recently been issued, because they really go into detail about this. So this is a definition of an AI system. And then we have a different term, which is AI model, which is different from an AI system. And I will talk about that later, because AI models are regulated only when they are general purpose AI models under the AI Act. Now, I will start. I said before that there are different categories based on risk. The first category is relates to an unacceptable level of risk. So we were talking about prohibited AI systems, and here you have, for the sake of time, I won't go in detail into all the every item of the list, but just to give you an idea, here you have I gave you here a list. As you can see, they are very risky and also immoral applications that have been considered unacceptable because of how they can interfere with fundamental rights. So you have social scoring, biometric categorization based on sensitive information, manipulative systems, profiling to predict criminal behavior. Well, you can see these are all applications that have been largely discussed as in all the debates about AI regulation. These are some of the applications that have been most discussed also during the legislative procedure as particularly problematic, and therefore they have all been included in this list. And then there are high-risk AI systems. So an AI system can be high risk if it falls into one of two categories. So either it is a product or a safety component product falling within certain legislative acts that are in Annex 2, and these are basically legislative acts about product safety legislation. So in new law, risky products are regulated by different legislations. For example, medical devices is considered a risky product. And if an AI system is used as a safety component of a medical device, then the AI system per se is also high risk because it is used in, let's say, in a risky product as well. So you have here in this annex, you have a list of legislative acts that relate to different products, and if the AI system is incorporated in one of these products, then you can, as a safety component, or if the AI system per se is one of these products as a standalone product, then it will be high risk. And then you have products that require a conformity assessment by third parties. This is indeed as well, it's a bit legalistic, so there is a list of situations. And you also have AI systems. I think here I made a typo, should have had a third bullet point. There are also AI systems that are listed in Annex 3 of the AI Act. So basically, if the AI system is used in a number of applications that are listed in this annex, it is high risk. For example, in education, or to assess the creditworthiness of individuals, for border control. So there's a number of high-risk situations that are listed in this annex, and it's quite clear, I have to say, just looking at the annex, it's quite clear to understand if there is a high-risk AI system. Also, there are exceptions. So indeed, this is the basic rule as I explained it before, but then there are exceptions. So in some cases, if you can prove that the AI system does not pose a significant risk to the health, safety, and fundamental rights of natural persons, you can basically have you can have a situation where the AI system is not considered high risk, and here you have the criteria for the application of the exemption. I will not go into detail, but just let you know that there is an exemption, so it is not all black and white, but the legislator wanted to have also a more nuanced approach. Now, if you are an high-risk AI system, the majority of the AI Act applies to you, I would say. So the most of the requirements of the AI Act have been designed for high-risk AI systems. And it is a very complex framework that applies to high-risk AI systems. And there are several obligations. So this is perhaps the most complex and difficult to comply with part of the AI Act, because providers and deployers of high-risk AI systems must comply with several obligations. So I will start from providers. Providers must have in place a risk management system, must follow certain data and data governance practices, have technical documentation, ensure the traceability of the systems functioning. Then there are obligations on transparency, human oversight, accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. So I will not go too much into detail, but just let you know that there are several obligations that apply to providers of their system, so those that provide their system. And before I go to the next category, and then I wanted to say that there are also obligations that apply for deployers. So those that deploy the high-risk AI system, they also have some obligations, but most of the obligations are for providers, not for deployers. So providers are the main target, I would say, of the framework for high-risk AI systems. Then, as I said, there is category, another risk category that is for AI systems that are, let's say, public-facing. They can be used in situations where they interact directly with natural persons, or their output interacts directly with natural persons, and therefore they pose risks that are about transparency. So the first example is interactive AI systems, chatbot. Maybe it's the most classical example that you can relate to. If you have a chatbot, of course, you have a direct interaction as a natural person with a chatbot, and there are issues, risks of manipulation in your interaction with the chatbot. And therefore, for chatbots and other interactive AI systems, the Act requires the deployers to inform the user that they are interacting with an AI system, unless it is obvious. Another transparency issue is about output generated by AI models. So the known as generative AI output, for example, the images and videos produced by AI systems that you might have heard of, and they have become particularly popular in the news because they can be very problematic, especially if they spread disinformation. And here again, the type of risk is about transparency, because indeed you have an image or a video showing something that is fake, or is either, and this can be either misinformation or disinformation. It can be risky for a number of reasons, and therefore these outputs must be marked as AI generated, so that people can understand that it comes from an AI, that it has been generated by AI. Well, and then there are other cases, such as emotion recognition or biometric categorization system, when you want a person to know if they've been subject to emotion recognition or biometric categorization, and even deep fakes, which, as you know, has been a very big issue. Here you have to mark the content as artificially generated or manipulated. So this is the third category of based on risk, where you have issues relating to transparency. And then, as I said, a fourth category will be the AI systems that are not subject, that don't fall under the scope of application of the AI Act. Then the categories that I described so far are about AI systems, and then there is a separate chapter about AI models. So AI models are the models, let's say the AI algorithm per se, that are not incorporated in a specific system. A system is specific to the use of the AI in a given case. So, for example, you have an AI system for migration, whereas a model is what you have before, that can be used in for different use cases. And for AI models, there are also specific obligations. You have an obligation, you have provisions for AI models, for all AI models that apply to all AI models, so the base level tier. And it's basically here, you don't have many requirements. You mainly have some requirements on transparency. And then you have more obligations if the AI model qualifies as an AI model with systemic risk. And that is another tier, so another risk category of AI models that pose generative AI models that pose more risks. And here whether an AI model poses systemic risks or not is defined. It can be presumed based on the on computational power. Let's say we use this criterion floating point operations to define the computational power of the general purpose AI model. Okay, this was to give an overview of the different risk categories. Here again, as you can see, it's an overview of the obligations of general purpose AI models. Yes, I hope the different risk categories were clear so far. I didn't go into the detail into the requirements because it will take a lot to explain, but it is I mean, they're very stringent requirements, they're very detailed, and it's a very long piece of legislation. There are indeed many articles, so it is it takes some time to digest it. As I mentioned before, in parallel with the AI Act, so the legislative proposal and the legislative procedure for the Act, we also had another procedure taking place under the Council of Europe for the adoption of a convention on AI. The Council of Europe is an international organization and is separate from the European Union, so they're not the same. But what happens at the level of the Council of Europe can have influence and often influences also what happens at the level of EU law and vice versa. So there are two frameworks that somehow talk with each other. And so if you're talking about AI, the regulation of AI in Europe, it is important to also mention what has been happening in the context of the Council of Europe. And what has been happening is the adoption of this Convention on Artificial Intelligence, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law. This has also been recently adopted and ratified by the member states of the Council of Europe, which are nations located still in the continent of Europe, but it has also been open to ratification from countries outside of Europe, which makes it quite interesting because countries such as Japan and China can and have ratified this convention. So it has implications also beyond Europe. And here as well, as I said, these initiatives tend to have some level of convergence at the global level, and in particular in Europe, you can see a significant level of convergence when it comes to the core principles that have been affirmed in law about artificial intelligence. So indeed, there is a focus on protecting fundamental rights. This is the case for the AI Act. It talks about equality and non-discrimination. I have to say the Council of Europe Convention is more high level, is more general. And it has less specific requirements than the AI Act. The AI Act is very specific because it also talks about technical requirements. So you can see that also there's been an input in drafting the AI Act from computer scientists, and it's quite detailed, the AI Act, I would say. Whereas here you have a convention that is more that affirms more high-level principles. And another aspect that is interesting and differentiates the convention from the AI Act is the fact that it also talks about democracy and the rule of law. So it is about fundamental rights, democracy, and the rule of law. This is not as much a thing in the AI Act. The AI Act is mainly concerned with health, safety, fundamental rights, and not really democracy and the rule of law. Whereas here in the convention, you have, as you can see, Article 5, that talks about integrity of democratic processes and respect for the rule of law, and which is well known that AI systems and models can pose risks to democracy and the rule of law. As concerns democracy, we can also think about AI spreading disinformation through AI-generated output and deep fakes. Indeed, it has been acknowledged that it is a major risk to democracy, and this is why this convention decided to address it, at least by affirming general principles. And then I wanted to have a short focus on fundamental rights protection. So the AI Act has provisions on different aspects, cybersecurity, fundamental rights, transparency, human oversight. But I just wanted to highlight that one of the key objectives of the AI Act is indeed the protection of fundamental rights. Now, per se, the European Union does not have competence to legislate on the protection of fundamental rights. It does not have a general competence. It has specific competencies that are relevant for fundamental rights, but it does not have a general competence to legislate on fundamental rights protection. You might know that the European Union, under the principle of conferor, can only legislate if the treaties specifically confer on the Union a conference to legislate in an area. So the AI Act has been adopted on using certain legal bases in the treaties that are about data protection and market harmonization, and the AI Act is mainly an instrument about the harmonization of the internal markets. So I think it is interesting to highlight this, that they are protecting fundamental rights, but because with the ultimate objective also to ensure the establishment of functioning of the internal market, with the basic idea that if you protect fundamental rights, you make AI systems more trustworthy, then you make the provision of services that incorporate AI or of products that incorporate AI in the internal market safer and more trustworthy. And this ultimately is beneficial for the digital single market and even non-digital single markets in general, for the establishment and functioning of the internal markets. The provisions of the AI Act on fundamental rights, as I said, have been largely influenced by pre-existing ethical frameworks on trustworthy AI. And in particular, you have, as I said, these guidelines of the level asset group that already had some principles relevant to fundamental rights, such as privacy and data governance, diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. I also wanted to stress that trustworthy AI is a term that we all use in policy discussions. Computer scientists use a lot of this term, trustworthy AI, but it is not a legal concept. It is a term that emerged in ethical frameworks and has been used also for legal discussions. But trustworthy AI generally means an AI system that can be relied on, but this is not, the principles on trustworthy AI are more ethical, and it is not a legal concept. And then the AI Act has tried to translate the principles of trustworthy AI in legislation, so in a legal dimension, let's say, but it is not a legal concept. And fundamental rights are important to shape a number of obligations, and it goes through the concept of risk. Basically, providers and deployers of AI systems must assess and mitigate risks to fundamental rights. So risk is the cornerstone, let's say, of the key instrument used in the AI Act to protect fundamental rights. And this is also a way to use risk as an instrument to protect fundamental rights, has been done also with the idea that with risk you can balance innovation on the one hand and the protection of fundamental rights on the other. And what is the relevant fundamental rights framework that you have to take into account in the AI Act? So we are talking about fundamental rights, but which fundamental rights? Because you have national constitutions that have their own fundamental rights. Then you have the Charter of the European Union with the fundamental rights recognized in the legal order of the European Union. Then you have the European Convention of Human Rights, which is from the Council of Europe. And then you have all the international conventions, declarations about fundamental rights. So you wonder which of all these fundamental rights frameworks you have to take into account when you try to respect provisions of fundamental rights in the AI Act. And here you have different indications in the AI Act that the charter should be given a central role. You should look primarily at the charter, but you also must look at the ECHR. As I said before, the Council of Europe is very influential. The conventions adopted under the Council of Europe are very influential for EU law. So it would make sense to look at the ECHR and also to look at the recently adopted Convention on AI that has been promoted under the Council of Europe. And also, one thing I wanted to emphasize is that we now have the AI Act, but it is characterized by the fact that it imposes technology-specific obligations. So the obligations of the AI Act are about AI. This doesn't mean that if you have an AI system, if you develop or deploy an AI system, you should only look at the AI Act. Because there are also other obligations that are more horizontal, that don't apply only to a specific technology, and that can be relevant when you're developing or deploying an AI system. So especially when it comes to the protection of fundamental rights under the relevant provisions of the AI Act, you have to take into account a number of complementing and overlapping pieces of legislation. And I wanted to just mention a few here, where you might all know the GDPR. So indeed, there are several interplays between the GDPR and the AI Act. And if with the AI, in the deployment of the AI Act, but also during its development, you have the processing of personal data, you will also have to comply with the GDPR. Then you have the Digital Services Act that imposes obligations for online platforms and search engines, among others. And the obligations for online platforms and search engines can overlap with certain obligations for providers of general purpose AI models in the AI Act. And then you have the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive that requires businesses to assess and mitigate risks to fundamental rights in their activities. This applies to businesses in different sectors, not only digital technologies. But it is interesting to see how, if a business has to take into account to assess and mitigate the risks of their activities to fundamental rights, it would have to look both at this directive as implemented in member states and the AI Act if they're using AI systems. So I will now offer my concluding remarks. I know it's a lot to take because the Act is a very complex piece of legislation. I also wanted to put it a bit in context in relation to other initiatives taken globally, to the ethical frameworks that developed before it, to the Council of Europe Convention on AI, and also to other legislations that have been adopted in Europe, like the GDPR and DSA. So it is a very intricate and complex new framework that has emerged for AI. We learned that risk categorization and the risk-based approach is a crucial element of the AI Act. And it is this by relying on this notion of risk and by relying on risk assessments that the EU legislator has tried to balance innovation and the protection of fundamental rights and other health and safety of individuals and other interests. I know that you might know that there has been a lot of criticism about the AI Act and about regulation in Europe. Many have been saying, including Mario Draghi, you might know there was an important report. Many have been saying that it could kill innovation. But indeed, the balancing between innovation and the protection of a number of interests has been done through risk. And it is here that it is possible to understand how the legislators try to find a new equilibrium. And in the future, it will be important to, the concept of risk will be important for the proper implementation of the AI Act to ensure that there is a good balance between innovation and trustworthiness. But also, it will be important to complement the implementation of the AI Act with other initiatives, such as on digital literacy and digital skills. Digital literacy is actually a requirement in the AI Act, and well, it will not, trustworthiness will not come only with legislation, but with an holistic approach. So here are my concluding remarks. I hope it was left you with more answers than questions. I hope I wasn't too quick. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Do you have any questions? No, it's time to put them. Latko.
I'm sure that you have followed the events in the recent Parisian meeting that ended yesterday. Have you been able to see the declaration, and do you find in it something completely new, completely different from what you have given us through your lecture?
Sorry, which declaration are you talking about?
Sorry?
You're talking
which
about
declaration?
The Commission declaration.
Yeah.
You mean
the declaration of the meeting? No, the declaration of the yesterday's meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It has been signed by most attending the meeting, with two exclusions: the United States and the United Kingdom. So, do you find there anything new in comparison with what you have told us?
No, these are policy statements, so they don't change legislation. The legislation is there. All I can say is that it is more and more clear from meetings of heads of state and policy discussions worldwide that the European Union is the regional organization that is that has been most attentive towards regulating AI. So we can see for sure usually criticism and divergence between criticism towards the EU and divergence between the EU and other countries like the United States that have decided not to regulate AI as much. So I would say in that regard, the legislation is there and is not changing anytime soon. We just have to make sure in implementing the AI Act that it is let's say that there is a good protecting with promoting and ensuring innovation as well. This is going to be the main challenge, and the AI Act is very complex. So it's difficult for operators to understand it, but that's a challenge to be solved in years. But nothing will change. I mean, these all policy statements that are made or agreements, for now, nothing changes the legislation that is there, and it will remain there for some time.
Thank you, Andrea, once again.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
We're going to have our last presentation from Professor Davor Horvatić from Faculty of Science, University of Zagreb. It's, theoretical physics division for, for energy.
For particles and fields.
Particles and fields, yes. The most important stuff in the universe.
Well, in the last century, maybe.
Yeah. That's also a possibility.
Thanks.
The floor is yours now.
Yeah, thanks. Something completely different now. You can ask yourself, what does physics have to do with artificial intelligence? Or you can ask yourself, what is ever Balenciaga did for Pope? Basically, I hope that I will be able to, in this short time, to convey a few physics ideas and not bore you to that, because who wants to see after all day of lectures to see a physics lecture? So basically,
me.
Okay. The thing is, several years ago, I was talking with a Dutch diplomat, and I said to him, like he was a retired guy, and I said to him, like, oh, you're talking about your life, but it's interesting that your culture attaché at all the interesting times, at all the interesting places. He just smiles, and then we start discussing other things. And what did I see? And actually, it was eye-opener that basically statistical physics has applications everywhere. Because when we talked about how things are done, basically you are looking for a path of least resistance. And there is not that much to it. People talk always about some great plans, great things about, like, something like, but you know that in reality, the things, they don't work that way. You actually have to push the system and see where it goes. And physics is actually, statistical physics is actually extremely interesting in a broad range of applications. What will I tell you today is that we think about this universe, but if we take laws of statistical physics, they will actually be valid in any type of universe. Even if the basic fundamental physics laws or forces are different, we know that statistical physics will adhere to same principles. For example, if I apply physics to ethnic tensions, we have vast body of work that will predict at which ratios of specific local ethnic groups you can anticipate violence. If I apply physics to elections, I can tell you that in our last elections in Croatia, voter body switched for the current president. Voter body switched from the liberal to populist, and I have explicit data behind it. I don't have to read the newspapers. I just need to analyze voter boxes, and I will see that something has fundamentally shifted in Croatia after last 15 years. And that basically current president did campaign for himself. He didn't even need to invest a single euro just by specific wording. He motivated specific election body. And this is physics. This is pure physics behind it. And actually, this is very interesting to see that you can apply it to conflicts. You can apply it to diplomacy. You can apply it to domestic things such as divorce. You can apply it to retail, and you can apply it to artificial intelligence. And basically, in this Nobel Prize for 2024, we had one physicist and one computer scientist. And basic thing is optimization. It was statistical physics. Hochschild was inspired by neurologists, by material science, by solid state physics. Hinton just moved ideas further. What ideas? Basically, when we talk about our world, this is the graph produced by Roger Penrose. We know that we have physical world. From physical world emanates mental world. And then from mental world, we discover mathematics. I say in Platonic sense, my colleague who has a degree in philosophy, who is also a physicist, can explain you more about that. I'm an applied physicist. I wouldn't dare to dwell on all the philosophical intricacies of this. But the thing is that actually we can use this mathematical modeling to describe physical world. And not only physics, but a bunch of complex phenomena. And if I ask you in this computer-generated image of 2 glasses of water, and I ask you, what is different between glass that is at room temperature and then glass that is on the body temperature, like 40 degrees Celsius, can anybody say what is different? What can we say that, what makes these 2 glasses of water different? Volume.
Temperature.
Temperature, yeah, but what is temperature? We say temperature, but what is basically different with these 2 glasses of water?
Movements.
Basically, at 40 degrees, the molecules move faster on average. And basically you have this kinetic energy. And it is very, when I talk about with children in school and I try to bring them artificial intelligence closer, they actually can understand very easily what this temperature means for artificial intelligence. There is temperature in artificial intelligence. It is very, very closely related to is it talking nonsense or is it coherent? And the things start in different empires more than a century ago. The Boltzmann, inspired by ideas from Maxwell and others, devised how to describe energy distribution of molecules of that are building matter around us, and he proposed his distribution. And this distribution has basically the same mathematical form as softmax function that we use in deep learning networks. And it is all connected to entropy. And entropy, as we know, is not only related to the physical system around us, it's also related to informatics. I don't know if you recognize this guy who Turing, yes, Alan Turing, who basically we have a great depth in Europe because of his and his colleagues' discoveries. Do you recognize the other guy? Shannon. Claude Shannon. It's Claude Shannon. Two guys that actually put ideas that were initiated in statistical physics into information theory, and then a bunch of guys and the lady came in 1927 and gave us most of our primary and high school problems. But basically, they initiated something that will produce standard model of physics only 50 years later. And usually, when I talk about artificial intelligence and influence of physics, I said, like, why do people have problem with physics? Usually, the physics that you learn in school is not the language of physics. It's language of technical physics. It's physics for medicine, it's physics for engineering, it's physics for technology. This is the language of physics. We are actually optimizing something which is called action. And in action, we have something which is difference of kinetic and potential energy. But basically, we are, as the Dutch diplomat told me, we are finding the path of least resistance between points A and B. The same thing as in artificial intelligence, we are optimizing something. Mainly, we work with fields, electrical, magnetic fields, and we do our theories, and we say the gauge invariance is something very dear to us. But if anybody has lots of spare time and it doesn't know what to do in life, I suggest you quantum field theory for a gifted amateur. Somebody can do crochet, somebody can do running, yoga, Pilates, but maybe you do some mind exercise that take like 5 years of your life and go from the beginning and do problem solving in your spare time. Just kidding, of course. And then we end up with this. This is something that I use in popular lectures to see if I have any conspiracy theories in the public. You know how can I see if there is conspiracy theorist guy in the public? I say this is the equation of the universe, and he will start to jottling me down. But basically, this is what we call standard model of physics. This is three fundamental forces: electromagnetic, strong, and weak force. And basically, this is difference between kinetic energy, how particles move through space, and potential energy, how they interact. Plus, of course, beautiful Einstein theory of general relativity, four fundamental forces. And this was my primary area of research, particle physics, and still is in major part. But basically, behind this is quantum field theory, which is glorified statistical physics in the fundamental principles. And basically, this is why I come from Department of Particles and Fields. This is what we do. We understand the structure of the proton. We want to explain how the universe transitioned from quark-gluon soup to what we now call protons and neutrons. But basically, as a physicist, we talk in the language of Taylor series. We have a joke. Everything in the first approximation, if you want to describe a cow, the cow is a spherical object in a vacuum of space. You know, how a physicist takes the world. First, everything is constant. Then you have linear interaction and everything is harmonic oscillator. Then you complicate things further. But basically, physicists will use Taylor series, single processing guy will use Fourier series in the composition. Computer scientist and researcher in AI will use neural networks. And what is connection between all these pieces? They are all approximators of something. Neural networks are general approximators. With Taylor series, you approximate the function. With Fourier series, we usually approximate something. We build a model of the world. And what is physics? Building mathematical models of the world. And this is Hinton. And how did he got idea for his network? Don't mind this equation here. Basically, this is the model of how magnets work. How will magnet align to north to south? But he will, you have an atom, and then you have spin of an electron and so on and so forth, not to go into details, but you can imagine that a magnet is aligned on the direction of my thumb. And he will see, oh, what are my neighbors doing? Are they pointing in the same way? And he will orient himself to minimize the energy. I could talk about water preferences. How will I vote on next election? So I will see what my friends are doing. But basically, human interactions are more complex. And we know that basically, if you were talking about left wing, right wing, they form different networks, and their minimal energy is different. And this is why they have different signatures. But basically, his network was utilizing the same thing as magnet does. Oh, I will put myself in on and off state dependent of the energy of the rest of my neighbors. And then what did Hinton do? Hopfield network was, oh, I'm either off or on. And when I'm trained, I'm trained. And it was a good example of associative memory. In what sense? Basically, you could store patterns, and it was very robust. It was the same question when you are asking about in military sense, do I have a robust network on when somebody performs an attack on network? How much network can be destroyed that command structure, that information structure will be preserved? You can use fundamental physics system and apply it to different levels. What the godfather of AI did, he just moved his idea further. Maybe you remember that I showed you on the slide the Boltzmann distribution for the energy levels of the water at certain molecules of water at certain temperature. Well, what would physicists see in this place? He says like, oh, the Hopfield is at 0 temperature. There is no wiggling. It's fixed. But Hinton just turned the temperature up. He added stochasticity. For example, if you are stuck in the false minima, just add more energy, more wiggling, and the particle will find a way and drop into global minima. He actually gave neural network more energy to explore, as we say, the landscape. If you can see the landscape and then put the temperature down, you can maybe cool down to optimal minima and be trained. And this is why this year's Nobel Prize was awarded, because they took fundamental ideas from the physics and applied them to the training of neural networks. And the thing is, Hinton actually did something what whole community thought it was crazy, because there was some mathematical theorem said like 1 layer is enough. And then they used input layer and start adding other layers, hidden layers, and they were able to learn representations. Similarly, our vision, when we see the world around us, usually when you are in primary school, you have this graph. Oh, you see a tree, and then the lens in the eye inverts a tree, and then brain just has to make it. No, you have over 30 plus centers for the vision in your brain. And if you want to learn on the popular level, there is a beautiful book from famous neurologist Ramachandran, Phantoms in the Brain. Beautiful book. If you want to see the world with different eyes, read Phantoms in the Brain. I don't think there is digital, only in pirate, that somebody scanned it and put it on the web. But basically, it's a book in a print form. Or if you don't have time to read, go on TED Talk and watch Ramachandran's talk about how he amputated the phantom limb. This is like, it will give you new insight of the workings of the human brain. But what I want to say, when we see the world, we are actually doing the same thing as convolution and neural network. We see the lines, we see the colors, we see the patches, and we actually deconstruct and rebuild the sense of the world in our head. And As I said, he introduced hidden units and utilized statistical physics and Boltzmann distributions to train the net, and net was able to learn much more representations and gain the capacity. And we have to be very careful. I usually say that our brain is evolutionary trained neural network. When I want to explain this to children, I say like, why are you scared about noises in the dark? But if your neural network is not scared about noises in the dark, long ago you will be eaten by big cats in Africa, because you have to react to strange noise. If you do not react to the danger, well, it's not good. This is not a human brain. This is brain from chimpanzee. If you learn Latin, you will see this is a chimpanzee. What is the difference between human brain? Bigger prefrontal cortex. You know who taught me most about human race from the natural sciences? Franz de Waal, primatologist, who actually wrote Our Inner Ape. And if you want to really understand and see human, I read everything that the guy wrote. It was usually fun to read about, like he's coming to conferences where the people who only work on people talk about people. And then he's like somebody who had to see the whole primate evolutionary tree. Like you can really learn much about people. But why is it wrong to address human brain and human neurons as a computer? Why is it better to talk about neural networks? Because our brains are not computer. If we are a computer, they gave people, oh, take a $1 bill and look at it and draw it. Okay, then draw it from the memory. You can see all the parts of the brain that are included in the visions, how they work. And basically, if we were a computer, we would just summon JPEG from our hard drive and do, line by line, like that all the line printers reproduce the picture. And this is what changed everything. Attention is all you need. And the funny thing is that when you look now, most of the researchers were originally at Google, and Google was, the story that it was afraid to put it in the public. And your talk was talking about that, like in the regulation and everything, we have to be very careful. But this transformer is the current most popular algorithm in the room. Everybody is using it. We are staking it, and we are building our general pre-trained transformers, with what GPT is. But basically, what in reality is, it takes sentences and makes autoregressive model. If I say you are dancing, what is the next word? Queen. Yes, Basically, it takes and it outputs the next word. But I would say your answer is extremely low temperature. It is the most predictable. What would be higher temperature answer? You are the dancing
beer machine
or something like that. Okay. But the funny thing is, you can read Understanding Deep Learning, and this, if you are into deep learning, if you know a little bit of mathematics, this is excellent introductory book. I cannot recommend you this enough. It will, if you have some mathematics background, you will really go into much better understanding how the deep learning is working. And I will not bother you with all the activation functions and layers. And you know that it's actually linear approximator. There is folding in manifolds and so on and so forth. Basically, by adding layers, you are adding capacity to learn. And if you have 3 layers, you can get 9 sections, and you can approximate more. So as I said, this is as general approximator, but this is like just the beginning. What I wanted to say to you, why is this temperature important when we are deploying language models? Just to get the basic understanding. I said to you, like, okay, Boltzmann said this, they are using something similar, but if the temperature is very low, the probability, if I want to assess the next word, but I want to have several candidates. Then if temperature is low, I will only have 1 candidate, and I will not be creative. The thing is, if I raise the temperature, there is high probability that we will start getting gibberish out. And this is why, if you are using the backend of these pre-trained models, they don't allow you to raise the temperature in certain sense. They really allow you to just play in small range of temperatures to get the creative outcomes, because you don't want to get beyond critical transition, which is again thing from statistical physics. We know that we have water at certain point, water becomes ice. And the thing is that it happens also with language models. And you know, everybody has the friend who can, for example, go for 1 Belgian beer, 2 Belgian beers, and then after n+1 Belgian beers, person who is coherent is not coherent anymore, loves all the world, or in worst case scenario, you have to carry it home or call a cab. But there is this kind of phase transition in coherence. And the funny thing is, if you even count the effective parameters, actually the weights that you are training in the model, there is a phase transition. They're not good in anything, and at a certain point, they're almost good at everything. This is the things that we need to understand. And the funny thing is, maybe you, in some part of your early education, remember the ideal gas law. You know, we had some isochores, isotherms, something we draw. This was like the basic physical model to describe how the gas behaves at certain temperature, and it has certain pressure and volume and so on and so forth. Do you know that what physicists discovered about this model? That basically you can find same isotherm-like curves when you are training these models, and now they can actually assess why is it so expensive to train these models and to achieve GPT-5 or something. Because it's reversely proportional. First, this is like, I can even explain you this on the basic level. If it's cold outside, you will put a jacket, but it will not, and it will be good, but it will not help you to put several jackets. And you know, on house, there is reasonable amount of isolation that you put on the walls. And we are now in this tipping point. This is why I said, like, maybe we need better approaches, better algorithmic approaches, better explainability, better faithfulness, better interpretability, because we harvested the easy part. Now we need to add more and more energy, more and more curated data to push the boundary further. And not to dwell too much on physics, but basically for the mathematically inclined in the audience, this is the particle physics. This is how particles propagate and how they interact. But if you want to derive basic equations which govern particle interaction and propagation, you will use something like this. And if you have keen eye, you will recognize Boltzmann here again. So statistical physics is hidden on so many levels. And this is why I always say, if you want to push boundaries, if you want to do models, if you want to understand complex systems, apply them outside of physics. I can also recommend you another book, Critical Mass by Philip Ball. How to apply physics to elections, how to apply physics to urbanism, how to apply physics to conflicts. There is vast information that can be really harnessed, and complexity systems that can be utilized to get better understanding of the world. On the simple thing, we talked about AlphaFold, we talked about image generation. The thing is, there is something really advanced topic which is called renormalization group, which describes how interactions change when they collide particles in CERN and when they move to the early universe. But the thing is, neural networks, renormalization group work the same way. Here are difficult equations for physics which will explain how actually interaction moves with energy. But the same thing can be applied to noising, denoising, like generating images from noise, or producing something like AlexaNet encoder-decoder structures which will actually learn something from the images. So basically the same mathematics is on the every level. And for the end, don't disregard the bunch of mathematics. I want to tell you about my research on the few slides. This is like fresh of the printing press. Basically, we uploaded it to archive. I work in explainable artificial intelligence. Big part of my career was forecasting around time series. And we were always very concerned about black box approach. These days, you have so many forecasting algorithms like TS meter from Meta, from Google, and they are utilizing the same thing as in language models. They are finding patterns similar to language. They are learning patterns and trying to predict. And we said, like, this is all black box. Can we do better? Because we don't need black box. We actually need really understandable deep learning. And basically, we built a network that is acting as a physicist. And I will explain this potentially gibberish up there. What did we do? For example, if gas prices change, you want to know what impact would this have on the prices of bread? Or imagine you are calculating returns, not stock prices. Be careful. Whoever is working with stock prices has a problem. Professionals work with returns and risk management. You grab returns from your ETFs and you want to understand interaction in time. Why? Because usually you want to do informed decision making. You want not to do deep learning. You want to do something humanly understandable. And basically, if you look here, I have some index alpha JL is 2. This is, how do we read this? Time series 1, 2 days before, the value of X1 2 days before influences X2 now with this factor. And basically what we were shocked that we used again statistical physics. And we built some kind of architecture. I will not again dwell too much, but the thing is, first we provide past, like whatever, like last 2 weeks, and then we train mask. We let artificial intelligence use what is important, learn what is important, what is not important. Then we mask the input, and we say, okay, now learn coefficients, learn actual physical process, learn mathematical equation, and then multiply mask with learn coefficients and multiply the input. We are forcing black box to be completely open. We are forcing the box to learn 3-dimensional tensor, which says who is interacting with whom at which point in past. And basically, when you get something like this, and when you just like, oh, there is a small influence of number 4 at 4 days ago, and this is like small negative influence 4 days ago on the time series, from time series 3 to time series 4, which can be read off. And basically, disregard the mathematics. If you translate to the human language, if you do somebody who is making decisions, he will know how to interpret this number. If somebody says like the gasoline change for this amount 2 days ago will increase price of bread for this percentage that many days in the future, this is something which people can work with. This is the number they understand. They don't need black box, because the black box actually approximated and learn something which is humanly interpretable. And the funny thing about model is it's not time fixed. It can learn how these coefficients change in time. So you can really see if there is a phase transition, if there is change of behavior. And hopefully this kind of research will enable us to push forward, to open the black box, and again utilize the same thing, statistical physics. Because we know the statistical, as I mentioned to Philip, about critical mass, we can tell so much about traffic congestions, about stock markets. Yes, we can do beautiful things with black holes and inspire my imagination, but at the end of the day, we need data science, which are bringing us understandable numbers that we can base our decisions upon. And we heard interesting topics today that we have a problem, that less and less people are going into STEM, into maths, into physics. The interest to even be teachers in these disciplines is declining. And when I was talking to industry, I saw that some people in industry don't grasp the problem. Because I heard from one guy in the industry, he says, oh, we are lacking people who are good at programming, math, and physics. We will import them from Afghanistan. I was like, what? We are not talking about basic utilities. We are talking about people who are trained with good programs for early childhood, who are trained to understand programming languages parallel to math and literacy. Because today, yes, we will use this clouds, AIs, deep seeks, name the fancy word for AI model of the week. But if you don't understand what you are using, if you don't have critical thinking, you are just, what we say, coding monkey, copy paste without understanding and hoping that something will pop up. And this is why faithfulness in AI, interpretability in AI, and decision making for quality AI is good, is needed. Thanks. Okay, this was not too much physics. Questions?
Thank you. Yes, I have a question. Did you predict the outcome of Croatian last elections? Did you predict?
No. This is a good question, and I have to. Okay.
Please.
Okay.
So, please. Did you predict it day before the election or 2 days before the election? And if you predict, if you said about the outcome, what would happen? Would people go to the election, or they said it is already decided?
Great question. And why?
Thank you.
What I wanted to say, when I analyze elections with physics, I don't do predictions. I do strategy. As I said, use physics for decision making. Predicting stuff in elections is extremely difficult. Why? For example, in Croatia, I see, and also in disputable media, for example, if I look at the New York Times, and they're talking about Trump-Kamala statistics, they will say, good thing, they're not distinguishable. They are in statistical error. In Croatia, statistical error is usually 3 to 4%. One candidate has 10.2, other one has 10.8%. 10.8 is in the lead. Usually, if you want to do predictions, there is a couple of approaches that you can do. You can actually do social mining. You can actually see the networks of friendships. This is much more difficult now because nobody of relevance is on Facebook anymore. Just kidding. Because it really depends what background your demographics is using. But I want to say, I never do predictions. What do? I look at the specific signature from distributions and see where the voting body is disorganized. For example, I know for Zagreb, and this I promised you that I will write, and have interesting results, especially about populism, rising populism, in Croatia. Populism, yes, this is the word that I'm looking. But the thing, for example, what do I see for Zagreb? For Zagreb, I see that in Zagreb, the liberals are random. They will always vote for the liberal of the month, the liberal of elections. The current elections. The right wing is not random. There is no randomness at all. It is pure networking, like an army that knows what to do and will coherently go. And we don't see this in the left-wing parties in Croatia. In Zagreb, in different towns, I see different signatures. And what physics can tell you, if you want to do a campaign, it will tell you where you have infrastructure, where you have ideological background. And the thing is that this is like decision-making and strategy for elections. But for predictions, I wouldn't dare to do that.
But you compared it with the magnetic particles.
Yes.
This is why, and you can predict.
Yes.
Yeah. But you understand.
But we don't know.
There is a comparison between.
No. Your question is excellent. But we don't have this data. If you would have. For example, why was this Cambridge scandal with Cambridge Analytica scandal big with Facebook? If you are a company that is behind social networks. And your algorithms are good at classifying for which party specific candidate is voting. You are on a gold mine. You know in which directions elections will swing, because then you are working with exact magnetization of every single atom, and you can actually see what is the energy needed to flip it. I had a colleague who asked me like, oh, I don't like the current political situation in Croatia. How can we change it? I said, we don't have enough energy to move to another minima. Okay.
So we have another.
Yeah, please.
I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion about the claims that many tech bros keep repeating, and that is that the artificial general intelligence is just around the corner, and they just need a little bit more money, a little bit more.
Well, my answer to this is nuclear fusion is just around the corner. We just need more, little bit more money, a little bit more time. Well, this is a joke.
Is it even possible?
Well, actually, this is a good question, because today we are actually talking about branding. Artificial intelligence is perfect branding. There is no artificial intelligence. We are using machine learning. When you use GPT, you are not using artificial intelligence. You are multiplying a bunch of matrices, and you are multiplying fixed weights, and you are just getting, I would say in Croatian, you're just auto-regressively predicting the next word. Yes, you can do fancy things with it. You can do reasoning with it. You can do loops for reasoning, and this is great. When I see what they are capable, you know what is the best thing? I don't need general artificial intelligence. Even now, I know that these tools that we have on disposal are completely changed our educational system, because self-work at home is dead. Because everybody, for example, in physics, not in mathematics yet, heavy mathematics is not solvable yet, but basically physicists prepared the learning data sets by solving a bunch of things, putting it in LaTeX, putting it in PDF, and putting it online. Even 3 years ago, advanced mathematics for physics can be solved by basic models. Today, they are on level of PhD, but this is great for me. If I'm doing research, I don't have to spend 3 days writing helper dumb functions that will visualize something, that will check statistical significance. I can write a few sentences, and he will give me a bunch of Python code, and I can focus on fundamental stuff. And this is the key thing. Human with the machine, which is excellent, personal assistant with almost PhD, choose your favorite topic, with person who is domain expert. Because as we said, critical thinking, I know to understand if it's giving me slop, or he's almost as good at giving me something, but I wouldn't assess artificial general intelligence, because we even surpassed Turing tests. So, Turing test in some ways in original form is dead. So I think that AGI, we are talking about basic human fears. We are the product of evolution, and what is diplomacy in the end? You have to be careful about words. You have to carefully assess the body language, the wording, the everything. You are gauging other people which have agency. And you are organizing your worldview. And, this is why you can approximate diplomacy, politics, wars with statistical physics. Because actually, how much complex we are, you add certain basic, like, why can you address a car as like liquid? Basically, car is a dumb machine. You have 4 lights, like in Star Trek, the car, there are 4, okay, maybe if you didn't watch Star Trek, you have a few lights on the vehicle, and what do? If the vehicle is far away from you, you move closer. If somebody is very close, you keep the distance. And you basically are approximating van der Waals force between molecules. And people who are on the road are basically are interacting molecules. And this is why you can apply statistical physics. And this is the reason why when you have these traffic jams, you can understand why they are hard to disentangle. For example, you are in a jam, but there is a bunch of cars and they are driving and they have decent distance and everybody is behaving. And then there is some jerk who will try to cut a lane and immediately whole system will freeze. And then when you have ice, you have to invest a bunch of energy to move ice to water or to move water to steam. And this is what costs energy. And if you plot, there is a bunch of like physics of the traffic and stuff like that. You know, the thing is, as I said to you, I will be very, very careful with artificial general intelligence because now we are not giving our algorithms agency. Well, we are doing agency. Did you see the demos from Claude AI when it's giving it agency to point and click and to do stuff on the computer? This is giving it agency, but I don't know why people are assessing to these algorithms something that is inherently human by the processes of evolution and survival. You know, there is a bunch of research going there. People are saying, oh, it's lying to us. Well, this is emergent phenomena that we really need to understand. But how can we understand this phenomena if we cannot understand what is going behind the black box? This model that I showed you, maybe this kind of small incremental research can disentangle and understand why generally pre-trained transformers are giving us decisions. But the future is multidisciplinary. I will never be as good computer scientist as computer scientist. I can never be a good mathematician as mathematician. I will never be a good diplomat as a trained diplomat. But if you do the overlap and extract best of everybody, maybe we don't need artificial intelligence. Maybe we just need multidisciplinary people who collaborate and extract knowledge. This is the best I can say. Sorry.
No, it's okay. When you are talking about black box, then you said, maybe I misunderstood something, that we need to understand what are connections,
yes,
what the intensity of connection is, who is connected.
Why they are bringing this word, this decision, yeah.
Yes, but when I think about a neural network, we actually know everything about that. We know which neuron is connected to which one, what are the weights. So you have all this knowledge if you think about neural networks. So it must be something more.
No. But you have trillions of parameters. People have problem with a straight line with two parameters and understanding it. And we now training something with trillions of parameters. So
you mean non-linear?
No, I mean basically linear regression. People struggle with linear regression, and now we have some system which is basically a bunch of multidimensional hyperplanes squished by activation functions and stacked together in hundreds of layers. And we understand transformer. We have query. We have key. We are normalizing layers. We understand everything, but we still.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah, no,
that's not enough. Definitely.
This is not enough. This is not enough. We need a way to, and this is why everybody is talking about trustfulness, because we need to trust the outcome, and they are hallucinating. We need to be explainable, interpretable, because if you are doing with healthcare, if you are doing with policies, we are doing something that influences human life. There is no room for mistake. For example, I will give you an example of the early segmentation and diagnostic from X-ray machines. And you train the model on one machine and it's not applicable on another. You need to do transfer learning. And on this, another, they call me by another name, not Davar, but a person who recommends books. There is a so-called book, Undoing Project. The guy who wrote Moneyball, the famous movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt and the guy from Superbad, Jonah Hill. Yeah, Jonah Hill. The thing is, he wrote a book, Undoing Project, which is about life of Kahneman and Tversky, who wrote Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. But it's more digestible. Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow is the least read book according to Amazon Kindle.
The least read book.
The people start reading it like it's not Sarah J. Maas or Yaris or whatever. If you don't know who Sarah J. Maas is, I wouldn't go into there. The last Interliber in Zagreb everybody was into smart. But okay, Undoing Project because it's nice narrative about guys in NBA who wanted to build models to buy better players. And they're basically, this is why you cannot predict stock prices, because they are so close to Brownian motion, and there is systems where there is no structure to learn. And this is why you work with returns and volatility, and you mitigate the risk. Because if it's Brownian motion, if it's random process, there is no structure, and the best thing that you can do is predict the last value. And this is why it's hard to earn money in finances, other than difficult, you know, there is ways, but you need money to make money. You need money to make money.
To be a member of the Congress.
No.
Did you predict?
They have
You just need, you know, I can beat myself for the rest of my life. Why I didn't bought 10 Bitcoins 10 years ago, but you know.
Yeah.
Okay, people.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for your attention. It was a wonderful morning and the part of the afternoon. And now we are invited by His Excellency, the Ambassador of Belgium, to have a little snack on the other side of the first floor. Just follow. Leave,
we can do the experiment that you
First beer, second beer.
Joint photo.